Hello, my name is Dr. Phil Memoli, and our subject today is sugar addiction and its relationship to decay and brain function. Dentists, particularly, were concerned regarding sugar addiction because of the decay problems. That was mitigated in part by the introduction of fluoride, which helped the situation. But the question I raised with fluoride is if I'm getting holes in my teeth and I suppress that through fluoride, am I hiding a problem that can surface later in a bigger way? From my perspective, if the decay is out of control, fluoride might be a short-term solution, but in the long term, I think we need to learn how to solve the decay problem. The next thing would be blood sugar. We all know that sugars have a negative impact on blood sugar. Its impact is being felt by the new statistics that are out there. 80% of the adult population is now considered to be in the obese classification or the overweight classification, with 50% being in the obese classification and 50% of elderly adults now being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So clearly there's this problem. We have to talk about sugar's effect on the brain, and this is relevant to dentistry too, because each tooth has its nerve, its brain inside each tooth that has a core nerve that, like the brain, will be affected by sugar and the health of that tooth. Right now there's 25 million or more root canals being done on teeth. Some of these are due to decay, but a large percentage, it's unknown as to why the tooth is now hurting or not functioning properly. And that raises this question: how is these new decay problems, the brain function issues, and with brain function, we're seeing in children ADD, ADHD, we're seeing cognitive decline in adults, we're seeing problems that we didn't see 20 or 30 years ago. How is this happening if we have a more educated public? The answer to that might lie in the new processing. There's a new form of processing of food called ultra processing. Now, the neurological research that has been done in the past on addictive substances like cocaine, cannabis, heroin, is now starting to show that these ultra-processed products are affecting our brains in exactly the same way as these other highly addictive substances, such as heroin. So the question is, what are these ultra-processed foods? How do we recognize them, and how do we stay away from them so that we don't end up with decay problems, okay, brain problems, or blood sugar problems? If we break these down into categories, the first one would be ultra-processed sugars. So here, what takes the top of the list is high fructose corn syrup. Corn syrup, period, is not that much healthier. Fruit syrup, agave. So agave, even though it comes from a natural source, once it's processed or ultra-processed, it becomes an addictive substance. The next category would be the granulated sugars. So granulated sugars are mostly cane sugar and beet sugar. I have a lot of patients who come in and say, well, the only sugars that I pick are granulated sugars because they're healthier, right? Research might be indicating that that's not correct. Another category are processed fats. So our trans fatty acids, our hydrogenated fats, and our partially hydrogenated fats. Another culprit, if you will, would be salt, high intake of salt levels. Now, we do need some salt to maintain our body, and it is okay in small levels in the form of sea salt. But processed foods are now highly salted. There are naturally addictive substances which people choose to use every day. Caffeine, nicotine, chocolate. These are things that are contributory. Another category are the excitotoxins, which a lot has been written about. Aspartame and MSG, okay, which are having a major impact on brain function. So the key concept that we want to take away here now is that with the advent of ultra-processed sugars in food, equivocation has to be made. Ultra-processed is equivalent to highly addictive on the level of cocaine and heroin. When we look at food labels and we're looking at something and we say, this only has 5% or 2% sugars, we can't look at it from a quantitative aspect now and say there's only 1% or 2% sugar. What we have to look at it now is from the perspective of qualitative. If they're ultra highly processed sugars, they're highly addictive. We understand the effect it's having on the blood sugar with the increase in diseases. We understand the increases in decay, which is to some effect being warded off by fluoride treatment. So we may not be seeing the decay levels that are warranted. The other aspect of this is how is brain function being affected? And when we talk nerves, we also have to think, besides the nerves in the brain, the nerve in the tooth. All right, because I see a lot of dysfunctional nerves in the teeth. What are the brain functions targeted specifically by these highly addictive foods? The first would be mood. Okay? Mood is regulated by serotonin. So if you have normal serotonin levels, you're happy and you're normal. Everything's great. You go on with your life. But if your serotonin levels are depressed, now you are depressed. That takes us on to our next point. Pain threshold. There seems to be this new surge of addiction to pain medications, the opioids. There's an epidemic, if you will. How is this happening? Why are 1 out of 3 emergencies in the hospitals now related to opioid overdose? Why the surge in need for these opioids? Well, what is actually being targeted? The endorphin levels in the brain. Endorphins are our natural painkillers. So when the areas of the brains where these are made is being targeted, we're getting less endorphin levels, and that's going to lower our pain threshold. And the result is chronic pain or non-resolution of pain. Number 3, we're looking at sleep. There's been a major increase in sleep problems. Melatonin was actually considered one of the primary sleep problems, but people started supplementing with melatonin and we're not getting resolution of their sleep problems. So now we're focusing on GABA, with a lot of people seeing GABA. When there's normal GABA levels, we get normal sleep. When there's decreased GABA levels, we're seeing insomnia and interrupted sleep. Our next level of problem is energy. Okay, so energy levels in the brain are regulated by dopamine. So when we have dopamine, you might say, is our natural caffeine. How can some individuals not need any caffeine and are fine all day? And other people need 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee a day. And I'm not talking about energy problems that are related to mitochondrial dysfunction, which is another issue. We're talking about depressed dopamine levels. Brain function number 4, if you will. Energy, brain energy. It's modulated by dopamine. So when dopamine levels are low, we have fatigue. We have slow brain function. When they're normal, we have normal brain levels. So dopamine can be thought of as our natural caffeine. It can be thought of as helping to stimulate us without the need for constant caffeine, constant need for drinking coffee. And this is distinctly different from mitochondrial dysfunction, which is another distinct issue. The next issue is nutrient levels for the brain, blood glucose levels. When they're high and they're normal, we have normal brain functioning. But when they're low, we're seeing the brain actually stimulate the cravings. Okay? And another aspect is brain stimulation, which is modulated by glutamate. Now, Glutamate, when the levels are normal, we have normal brain stimulation. They can be hyperstimulated by aspartame and MSG, monosodium glutamate. So now, again, looking at brain function, these are the 5 or 6 areas that are particularly targeted by these ultra-processed addictive substances. Now, how does brain function relate to teeth and decay? We had mentioned that there is a large nerve in this tooth. And from this perspective, we're seeing a new take on decay. Decay is becoming a major issue, not just in children, but in adults. With adults, we're seeing what we call recurrent decay. So decay occurring around fillings and around crowns, requiring the replacement of these things. But in children, we're seeing rampant decay. We're seeing kids coming in with 5 or 10 cavities. We're seeing kids coming with decay on every tooth in their mouth. And they're not coming in from the cities. They're coming in from well-educated families who are buying organic food. Parents who are brushing and flossing their kids' baby teeth. So how is this happening? The other systemic factors we're seeing is things that correlate to what's happening to the brain. A lot of the kids with these problems, we're seeing low mental stimulation. We're seeing a decrease in the pain threshold, so the kids can't even tolerate us touching the teeth, much less drilling on them. And as a result, a lot of dentists want to just put these kids under. And the parents are saying, they're craving sugar all day. What do I give them? I've been giving them fruit, and look, we have given them fruit, and look what's happening. This has become a major problem for us. And a lot of these new cavities and problems aren't responding to fluoride therapy. So it makes us go back and say we need a new perspective on decay. And what's going on? How is brain function interacting with decay? So we're looking at sugar in 2 respects. The impact sugar has directly on teeth, and the impact sugar has indirectly on teeth via the brain. There was a researcher in the 50s who did some research, John Lenora, and he came up with what he calls is, again, dentists tend to think most dental disease is local, but he came up with a systemic theory of decay. And his idea was that when there was sufficient sugar levels in the bloodstream, he saw a problem occur in the hypothalamus of the brain. He saw that the hypothalamus released a hormone, so we're talking endocrine system because we're talking, so this is neuroendocrine. So he saw that it released a hormone. He saw that this hormone went, in this particular part of the hypothalamus, it went to the parotid gland, which is here, the major salivary gland. From that parotid gland, the third part of that pathway, we call it a pathway when there's steps involved, the third part of that pathway went to the inside of the tooth, the nerve on the inside of the tooth. And inside that tooth, it stimulated that nerve to affect cells, the fourth part of this now, that we call odontoblasts. And that's a big name for the cells that line the hard part of the tooth. So these odontoblasts are next to the mineralized portion of the tooth. Now the mineralized portion of the tooth doesn't have a circulatory system. So how does it get nutrients? Well, these cells, this hormone stimulates these cells to create a pump. And it pumps the nutrients into the hard part of the tooth, into the dentin. So the dentin is a live portion of the tooth. So now, here's what's happening. So his research showed that once one part of this pathway was knocked out, the tooth wasn't getting any nutrients. And not only that, once this pumping action stopped, bacteria from the inside of the mouth now could get into the tooth to cause decay. This theory of the systemic concept of decay, as you could imagine, was not well received. To prove his point, and I don't remember if it was him or someone else, but basically what they did, they put a stomach tube which bypassed the mouth into certain animals. And they basically bypassed the mouth. And they pumped sugar water into the animal. And mind you, none of the teeth ever touched the animal's teeth, but all the animal's teeth rotted out. So is decay a local phenomenon or a systemic phenomenon? We just finished discussing decay. I want to stress again that there is a large nerve inside the tooth and that we're seeing a lot more root canals that don't have a decay cause associated with them. So these teeth are dying mysteriously. Could this be part of that cause? That's something that we investigate. What is the actual dental treatment that we are approaching? Not from the holistic perspective or the technological perspective, but from the biological perspective. We have to look at this again in a triad. There's the dental component, there's the systemic component, and there is the nutritional component. In terms of the dental component, in my practice, we don't apply fluorides in terms of trying to prevent this. We are trying to solve this, and fluorides would give us a false positive or false negatives. So we're not utilizing the fluorides. In terms of the decay, we're trying to treat this as conservative as possible. We are seeing cases where this could take a year or years to resolve, to where we're placing fillings in 1 year and a year later there's massive decay around the filling that we originally put in. In terms of the systemic treatment, okay, we had mentioned this neuroendocrine pathway that regulates the tooth getting nutrition. So a tooth that's not getting proper nutrition, bacteria is going to get in and cause decay. So there is a way to assess and treat this from an acupuncture and homeopathic point of view, okay, which has helped significantly. It does help to focus on improving the nerve function inside the tooth. The nerve in the tooth functions exactly like the nerves in the brain. All these same neurotransmitters and hormones have to function the same way. So it behooves us to address these. Having a little low serotonin or dopamine doesn't always get resolved just by supplementing with it. So that's an issue that people have a problem with, I find. It's not simple supplementation. Sometimes we have to look beyond the beyond. Right. Ultimately, we want to correct the problem, because what we're looking for is the decay is the canary in the coal mine. The underlying problem is bigger, and that's what we ultimately want to resolve together as a team. Getting to the nutritional component of this, dietary or lifestyle changes have to be made. In this state, there is a war going on between dietitians and nutritionists. A relative of mine ended up with a triple bypass and was in the hospital, was successfully treated, was in the coronary care unit, and was under observation because they were concerned that there were clots in the heart itself which could kill him. While I was there visiting him, they brought his dinner up. So I said, "This is interesting." I said, "Did you order dinner?" He goes, "No, they just delivered it for me." So the dietitian picked it for him. Here's a man in coronary care in danger of a clot in his heart. They brought him a steak. Now the steak was well done. We know that outside burnt part of the steak, besides being carcinogenic, is harmful to the body. The next thing they brought him was coffee. So despite the fact that it's neurostimulatory, the coffee also is very high in vitamin K, which can increase your risk of getting a clot. And the third thing they gave him, which I found the most interesting, was they gave him chocolate cake. Okay, so now we have to step back for a minute and say, Is this the proper nutrition for someone who was just treated for a triple bypass and is now in risk of a clot? So I think the field needs to be left open so that nutritionists and dietitians can continue to argue what is the proper diet. And I think ultimately the patient needs to make the decision on what he's going to be eating, with nutritionists on one side promoting one idea and dietitians on the other side promoting their ideas. Diet has to be looked at. There are a lot of science behind what you should eat. The question is, will you make the change? A lot of people come in and say to me, just give me a pill. I don't want to make any lifestyle change. That's not going to happen in our practice. But for those who want to make the change, remember, we're thinking of the bigger underlying problem here. We're seeing kids with acid reflux now, with GERD. That's a huge problem. We're also seeing kids with absorption problems, with leaky gut. So these problems that we used to think of in the past as being adult problems, we're now seeing in kids. There was a woman here, had a lot of dental infections and a lot of decay, and we were trying to treat her, and we were trying to consider a treatment plan that went beyond just taking care of the decay. That included some nutritional consultations. And she said, I can't afford it. It's too much money. And her kids said to her, what are you kidding? They go, you have tons of money. It's not even expensive. No, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. And they said, we'll pay for it. And she said, no, I won't do it. And, you know, the woman had this stern refusal, adamancy not to eat, couldn't be budged in it. I said to her, you know, I was driving to work today and I saw on the way to the cemetery, I saw a hearse and it was being followed by a Brinks truck. So I said, there's good news. They figured out a way on how you could take it with you. Thank you for your patience and listening to this. If you want to contact us or learn more, visit our website. Thank you and have a great day.